Hey, good morning to everyone. We have a lot to do today, as usual. I know that teachers say that at the beginning of sessions all the time. Um, I think we're going to jump right in, which means I will share my source sheet right now. So I'm going to share my screen and I'll ask Mara to put in the chat the source sheet. I'll remind everyone that My Jewish Learning will send a PDF after our learning together today. I'm not able to respond to requests for the share, for sharing the document. You will get a copy of it. So you'll get that. And the document will close after our session today. I want to also remind everyone that I generally don't see the chat during our time together. As I always say, I'm looking at the document, I'm thinking, I'm looking at you. So you're completely invited to chat and discuss some of the texts on your own, but I won't see them until afterwards when Mara sends me a copy. So I also will say by way of introduction that if you don't get to share a reflection or a question today, you are also welcome to email me at abby@explorejewish.com. And I hope to be able to respond to you as soon as possible. So I think those are my introductory words. I will adjust my screen. There we go. Right now, I can see much more, many more of you. So I always feel a little sad at this time of year because we'll soon be making our way from these rich stories, and that's an understatement, these incredibly deep and rich stories in the book of Numbers, to also rich words in the book of Deuteronomy, Devarim actually, Deuteronomy. Devarim means words, but this is really, we're sort of ending this week with, I think, these extremely rich narratives in the book of Numbers in Bimidbar. And so it's always sort of, I think, this time of year as we get into the 3 weeks, as they're called on the Jewish calendar, the weeks of mourning, which I'll invite you to look up. We don't have time to talk about right now. And then we start reading the book of Deuteronomy. It's always just, I feel this sadness about saying goodbye to the stories of the book of Numbers. So with that said, we are going to jump in today to one of the most fun stories about Bilaam and the talking donkey. Now, I will say, I worded it that way just now, but we're not going to focus on the talking donkey. That's a great part of the story. I found myself this year thinking a lot about the power of words. And I think, especially in our worlds, in a very divisive world today where news is coming at us, that is, terrible news is coming at us frequently. And someone once said to me, when the media continues to publish all these difficult stories, a mentor of mine said, "Well, who's benefiting? Who's benefiting by all this negativity?" And so I want us to think about today, and I thought about sharing this caveat with you. I and for those who have studied with me, I often like to look for the positive, and we're going to look for positive today, in fact. And I don't mean to be Pollyannish, but it is a very difficult world today with a lot of difficult news, and the ways in which we speak to each other can be horrible. And so I want us to think together about the power of words and the inevitability of goodness and focusing on good. So it's a tall order, I think, for all of us today, but you can see here that I want us to think about the power of words. And also, there's so much beautiful poetry when Bilaam, this seer, this prophet, non-Israelite, when he's asked to curse Israel by Balak, by the nations of Moab and Midian to the east of the land of Israel, the only thing that can come out of his mouth, as the story goes, are words of praise for Israel. And so there are many beautiful parts to this poem, but one of the most famous words you can see on the screen in front of you, which I'll make bigger. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. There are different translations. This isn't the best one. This is JPS. How fair are your tents, O Jacob, meaning Israel, your dwellings, O Israel. And just really because this is part of our daily morning prayers and is a song that's taught to kids, it's very popular. There's, again, so much that we can analyze. We could spend, I probably say things like this all the time, we could spend a whole semester analyzing the poetry in this Parsha, in this Torah portion. But what I want us to do today is read some of the key texts from the Parsha, and then we'll read several Rashi commentaries on Ma Tovu and see what are the ways in which, what are the nuances that the rabbinic interpretations of this verse offer. And I'm hoping inspire us to think about what are the ways in which, like the words of Bilaam, we too can look for nuances of goodness. So I want to say that again. In all of Bilaam's poetry here, in this one verse, we're going to focus on not just the verse, but the rabbinic commentaries to see the nuances that the rabbinic commentaries add and the variations of goodness and what we can learn from that in our own attempt in the face of choosing negative or positive words and framings. What are the variations, the nuances that we can look for in goodness? So if that is too abstract right now, don't worry, we'll get down to tachlis, to practical, oops, sorry, let me just buzz. Meaty, we'll get down to some of the meaty words and commentary in a moment. So, okay, I'll pause here for just a couple of, if there are any clarification questions. I know this is a little abstract so far, but we will, I think, have no fear, we'll get down to some meaty words in a moment. So I see that Lois has a question. So if, Lois, I'm going to encourage you in the moment to ask a clarification question if that's what's on your mind. And keep your hands up so I can see you. And then we'll start reading some of the verses and commentaries.
You're unmuted, Lois.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Something I've always wondered, how does Bilaam even know about the quote unquote, Jewish Israel God, and why does he seek God's input?
Yeah, it's a great question. Let's see. Let's take the first question first. How does he even know about the Israelite God? So I would say that I'm just going to make a guess here. I don't know for sure. But if we imagine the ancient Near East and the neighbors, people that lived near each other, I guess I have the sense that people knew about each other's gods and they knew about each other's religions and practices. I can't say that for sure, but that's what I imagine. And your second question, why does he even seek God out? That's a great question. And I guess I want to think about that. I'm not sure. Part of me thinks that this is just a narrative leap in the story. In other words, it's the Torah, it's the Israelite sacred literature. And so the focus, even though it's a story about this non-Israelite seer or prophet, the story is such that Bilaam, the story is Israel centered, Israel focused. And so Bilaam does seek out the Israelite God. But I guess at the moment, I feel that it is a leap that we sort of have to take in the story. But it's a good question. Maybe there are other interpretations of that. Okay, if there are no more clarification questions at the moment, I'll pause here to see if there are any. We will read some verses. Okay. Okay, so we are going to read verses 1 through, and I marked it here. You'll see I have sort of these blue notes throughout to guide us. We're going to read through verse 13 really just to ground ourselves in the story. And then I will summarize a little bit, and then we'll read some rabbinic commentary. So there's a lot of text in here that you can look at on your own. It's obviously a very long source sheet, and the font is pretty big so everyone can see it. So I hope you'll forgive the length here. Okay, so I'm going to read. Okay, first one. The Israelites then marched on and encamped on the steppes of Moab across the Jordan from Jericho. And then our Torah portion begins. Balak. Balak, son of Zippor, saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. Moab was alarmed because that people was so numerous. Moab and Midian are often equated with each other. Again, the lands to the east of Moab, of Israel. And Moab said to the elders of Midian, now this horde will lick clean all that is about us, as an ox licks up the donkey of the field. Balak, son of Zippor, who was king of Moab at that time, sent messengers to Bilaam, son of Beor, in Petor, which is by the Euphrates, in the land of his kinsfolk, to invite him, saying, there's a people that came out of Egypt. It hides the earth from view, and it is settled next to me. Okay, so this might remind you of Pharaoh in Egypt saying this people is spreading out, it's covering the land. The Israelites are growing, is what the king is saying, and I'm threatened by them. Come then, put a curse upon this people for me, since they are too numerous for me. Perhaps I can thus defeat them and drive them out of the land. For I know that he whom you blessed is blessed indeed, and he whom you curse is cursed. For the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian, versed in divination, set out. They came to Balaam and gave him Balak's message. He said to them, spend the night here, and I shall reply to you as the Lord may instruct me. So the Moabite dignitaries stayed with Balaam. God came to Balaam and said, what do these people want of you? Balaam said to God, Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab, sent me this message. Here is a people that came out from Egypt and hides the earth from view. Come now and curse them for me. Perhaps I can engage them in battle and drive them off. But God said to Bilaam, do not go with them. You must not curse them. You must not curse that people, for they are blessed. Bilaam arose in the morning and sent to Balak's dignitaries, go back to your own country, for the Lord will not let me go with you. Okay, a very, even a complex beginning of the story, but this sets the stage. Balak is asking Bilaam, can you curse these people for me? As Lois said, Bilaam strangely consults with God, and God says, no, this is a blessed people. And right away, we see that there's this inevitability to Israel being blessed, and it's not possible, according to this narrative, to curse the people of Israel. I'll add also that in Genesis chapter 12, in Lech Lecha, at the very beginning of the Torah, when God says to Abraham, go, you will be a blessing, you will be a blessing to other nations, other families of the world. There is this sense throughout the Torah, a message is that Israel can be a blessing for other people. And here we see almost that idea taken to a new level. There's this, and I'm going to keep using this word, there's this inevitability of blessing. Israel will inevitably be a blessing and be blessed for others. So let me pause there because there's a lot going on in those verses, and I want to clarify anything that may need to be clarified before I summarize what comes next and we dive into some of the words of blessing that Bilaam utters, that he recites in his 4 blessings in his poetry to the people. Okay, so any clarifications here so far?
There was some questions about verse 4.
Okay.
So I don't know if we can scroll up. And
oh yeah.
I don't know if there is a missing word or there was a different translation. But it seems like the word grass is not in the in the grass of the field.
Yeah. I don't know. I forget if this is Everett Fox's translation. I'm not sure. I know I see people are looking here perhaps at Yerek Hasadeh. I'd have to look again at that verse and look at a few translations. I'm not sure. I'll encourage people to, if you have access, if you want to check Sepharia, you can check the different translations up there and see what they say. Thank you for that question. I see Ginny has a question also. So Ginny, if you want to go ahead and unmute.
How did Hashem choose Balaam to be the messenger here?
Yeah, I don't know. We don't know. We're not told that as part of the story. Again, I guess I would say that for me, some of the things behind the scenes as part of a Torah story don't matter to me as a reader as much as what the Torah is presenting to me. In other words, I'm supposed to take this story and as a Jewish reader, as a people, I always say we're not only a people of the word, we're a people of interpretation. We're an interpretive people. This is a text that asks us to interpret what's here. It's true, and it's part of the rabbinic tradition. Sometimes we do ask questions about the backstory, but I don't know. Yeah, I'm sort of at a loss to answer your question. But I look at the story and I say, okay, well, God, according to the story, did choose Bilaam, and so what are we supposed to learn from him? But why? I don't know. I don't know. Okay, other questions at the moment? Okay, so again, there's this, God tells Bilaam that there's this inevitability to blessing and he will not be able to curse the people. And when there are there are several other verses quoted below where that idea gets repeated in a few different ways, in addition to that Bilaam can only listen to what God commands. And so maybe speaking to Ginny's question a little bit, I don't know, maybe there's also Bilaam is a god. Maybe other prophets would not have embraced the connection to the Israelite God as much and acknowledged that really they could only serve as a mouthpiece for God. I don't know for sure. Okay, but there's lots of, you can look at this, I'll keep this in the source sheet that Mara sends out, and you can see there's a lot of just allegiance to God and allegiance to this idea of blessing. And one of the things, as I mentioned, what we will look at together today is this key verse, this key blessing that Bilaam offers to the people, and that Bilaam offers about the people, and we will unpack that a little bit and see what inevitabilities, nuances of blessings we can decipher when Bilaam, in theory, could have cursed Israel and instead blessed Israel. What are the variations of blessing that come out of just this one verse? Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. In different translations, here's one: how good are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings of Israel. So let's look again. Let's look now. Those are the questions just repeated. And we're going to read, I think, one at a time here. And I want to actually invite you we're going to take some feedback about exactly what's going on here. What exactly is the blessing? Because some of this is pretty enigmatic. It's pretty mysterious, like this first Rashi. And to remind everyone, Rashi is the early medieval French commentator known for his vast, but from some perspectives, simple commentary on the Torah and the Talmud, making the Torah and the Talmud more accessible for people to understand it. So Rashi says here, and Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, Matovu ohalecha. He said this because Bilaam saw that the entrances of their tents, the people, the Israelites, their tents, were not exactly facing each other. Okay, this seems perhaps a little opaque, but I want to invite, what do people think, before I tell you, what do people think this means? What does Bilaam notice about, according to this commentary based on the Talmud, what does Bilaam notice about the tents of Israel, the dwellings of Israel, that he thinks is praiseworthy? And there'll be many interpretations about this. This is one of maybe 5. Okay, I'm gonna just see if there's anybody who hasn't yet spoken yet, who wants to offer a possibility. Eager to hear from more of you. Feel free to raise your hands. Okay, Cheryl. And keep your hand raised for the moment.
Well, that would give them more privacy
Great.
if they're not looking into each other's doorways.
Okay, beautiful. So Cheryl, as you just said, what Bilaam is saying, the way that we understand this text is modesty. So I'm just going to write that here. Okay, so Bilaam is saying this is a people that's modest, perhaps humble. Humility and modesty are associated with each other, not necessarily, but indeed their tents, the people's tents weren't facing each other. And so Bilaam is saying this is a people that's modest. Okay, let's keep that in mind and let's keep going. I'm going to read text 5 here from the Talmud. Rabbi Yochanan said, from the blessing of that wicked man, you learn what he had in his heart to say. He wanted to say that they should have no synagogues or study houses. And thus it was reversed. His words were reversed to, how lovely are your tents, O Jacob. He wished to say that the divine presence should not reside among them. And thus it was reversed to your dwelling places, O Israel. Okay, this is a bit of a confusing, I think, translation. But if you notice in the Hebrew here, for any Hebrew readers, what the Talmud is saying here is that Bilaam, what is mishkenotecha? Your dwellings, your tents. What does that refer to? Bilaam isn't referring here to the tents and the fact that actual tents in the encampments, in the camp, that they were facing each other. Tents is a metaphor. It's a symbol for synagogues, places of prayer, and places of study. A Beit Knesset, a synagogue, and a Beit Midrash, a house of study, a study hall. So the commentary here in the Talmud is saying, rather than curse the houses of study or the houses of prayer, Bilaam actually praises them. So what's the significance of this in understanding Matovu ohalecha Yaakov? Oh, how good, how great are your tents? What is the blessing here? What is the goodness that Bilaam is highlighting? I saw a hand, but I want to invite anyone to jump in and kind of take a stab at it here. What is he noticing? How would you articulate this? We get a little bit more abstract. What is he noticing about the people of Israel? What makes them good? Okay, Arnold, great. I saw your hand earlier. You can keep your hands up so I can see you and others can see you. And you can unmute.
Yeah,
There you go.
I think when you look out and you see this, it's like standing up on a mountain and looking out and you see a small town. It seems very calm, very peaceful, like it's a lovely scene, even though it's not nature, it's how people populate nature. I think he's seeing this as quite an amazing thing.
Okay. And would you say that's really interesting. Indeed, there's a sense of calm and peace. I like that. I would also just ask, anything based on these words in particular and this little rabbinic snippet where the rabbis are saying tents mean, Kathy, I see your hand. Tents mean specifically houses of study, houses of worship. I saw Paul's hand before Kathy. Okay. Paul, Do you want to go ahead and unmute and take a guess? And don't worry, I will share in a moment, but want to give you all a chance to share your thoughts.
Yes, thank you, Abby. Sorry to come in late.
That's okay.
I would appreciate a link if it's not already in the chat to the source sheets. But I think what he's noticing here is that this is a reverential and studious people.
Ooh, those are good words. Okay, great. So this is what I want to get across, that he's noticing that the Israelites, they build places of prayer, places of study. So not only are the Israelites worth noticing for their modesty, right? And I think that may be an important value in today's society where people in TikTok culture and YouTube culture, where we all have something to say, right? He's noticing their modesty, but at the same time, he's noticing, and I'm going to put together both what Arnold and Paul said. He's noticing perhaps calm places of prayer, calm places of study. This is, as Paul said so beautifully, this is a reverential or studious people. Okay, so when we're looking out at the world around us, perhaps Bilaam's key verse here that's become so much part of Jewish tradition and prayer, perhaps we're being invited to notice about Israel, but maybe even beyond that. Where do we notice people that are curious and that learn? Where do we notice people that are prayerful or hopeful? Where can we notice modesty, especially in a culture where that's countercultural? Okay. Andrea, I want to invite you to unmute, and then we're going to read another text. Okay, I hope people are with me here. There's a lot of different variations in this blessing that I really think are worth noticing and taking to heart. So, Andrea.
Well, it's a big anachronism. I mean,
Yes, it is. Of course, of course.
And so maybe I could interpret the interpretation as saying, well, they didn't have any study halls, they didn't have any synagogues then, but they were their tents themselves, their dwelling places had the Shekhinah in them already, and because he chose that word, and so he said what he could about them at that time.
Oh, okay. So that's very interesting. What you're noticing actually is that the word mishkenotecha has in it the root shin chaf nun, which is also used for a dwelling place. Andrea, I'll ask you to just raise your hand again, so so I can see you while we're discussing what you raised. Okay, wonderful, thank you. Yes, so that's beautiful. God's presence, and I think we'll come back to that a little bit more in just a moment. But I do want to kind of invite us. The rabbis are, and I'm sure some of you have heard this before, the rabbis are playful. The rabbis in rabbinic literature, in their midrashic, in their literature, their interpretive literature, they collapse time. For example, this is one of the most famous examples. In rabbinic literature, it is said that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob established the fixed prayers 3 times a day. And I think it's in this order, but I have to go back and check. So I'm going to say it, but don't quote me, even though this is recorded. Abraham established morning services. Isaac established afternoon services. Jacob established evening services. So it could be one or the other. I don't recall, but the idea that there actually were no fixed services until later, until the rabbinic time period. But for the rabbis, it doesn't matter. They use their imagination and they say, yeah, mishkenotecha, places of God's presence, are synagogues and places of prayer or places of study, hearing God's word or speaking to God. And that's part of the playful rabbinic mode of interpretation. So I like your interpretation on the interpretation, but I think it's okay to accept the ways in which the rabbis drash and interpret, and then take those interpretations to heart in our own ways, which I'm suggesting when I say, well, when we look at these interpretations, do we know that their tents were not facing each other? Of course, we don't know that. But the idea that the rabbis glean out of that a sense of modesty, and they're inviting us to think about the value of modesty in our communities, in Jewish communities, and I would say beyond. And they're inviting us to think about, what does it mean to be a reverential people, a studious people, to use Paul's words, to build prayerful communities, communities of hope, to build communities where we value learning and study and curiosity and asking questions. And perhaps those are some of the messages that this verse invites us to think about when we read it each year. Okay? Noreen, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, and then we're going to read another commentary.
Nechama Leibowitz talks about this in more abstract terms, and she says
Okay.
that the meaning of the word tovu is fair, and she
Mhm.
relates to it that what he saw was perfection in all respects, beauty, charm, simplicity, purity, and that that it's just what is being conveyed is just the idea of perfection.
Oh, very interesting. Okay, Noreen, thank you so. What did you say? Go ahead.
No,
Say
I
that
just thought it was really nice. You know?
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that into our study. Nechama Leibowitz, very well-known Torah commentator, an Orthodox woman ahead of her time, right? She, a very beloved teacher. I forget when she died, maybe in the 90s or early 2000s, if I'm not mistaken. I actually met her once at her home. So yeah, in Jerusalem. Yeah, that's beautiful. I'll tell you though, I am struggling a little bit with what she said, because as we'll see, there's so many, as I shared, variations or nuances on what ma tovu ohalecha means. What exactly are the tenets? And for me, I heard somebody say this week, perfection doesn't exist. So I love that idea that, you know, we're all flawed human beings and there's nothing perfect in the world. So I'm struggling a little bit with that mode of interpretation, but as we say, 70 faces of Torah, shivim panim laTorah, and I'm so happy that you brought her interpretation, her writing in today. So I want us to read at least one more. Let me just see here. Let me see if okay, no, we'll read two more. So now we're going to get a little bit more abstract. And Arnold, I'll ask you to hold off on your question for now, and then hopefully we'll have time to come back to you. So Mishkenotecha, Rashi says here, another interpretation that the Aramaic translation offers is that these were just encampments. What does Mishkenotecha refer to? It's not something lofty, as we read according to the Talmudic texts. It's not places of prayer. The tents are not places of, they're not study houses. They're also, it doesn't refer necessarily to the tents facing each other. It just refers to it's simple, like the dwelling places of Israel. So I want to suggest here that maybe Mishkenotecha, again, is not something lofty, your tents. It's just like the people of Israel. There's goodness, there's blessing, there's something to note as positive among the quotidian, among the regular people, as there's an expression in rabbinic literature, even this is a little, it's not such a nice expression, but am haaretz, people that are just regular people. We're not talking about loftiness here, but there's something even noteworthy based on the Aramaic translation of this verse of just the encampments, everybody, the masses, something noteworthy about the blessing that everybody brings to the table. Okay, another explanation, ma tovu ohalecha, how good or perfect or fair are your tents? How goodly, another strange word in translation, how goodly is the tent of Shiloh or Shiloh, which was the early location of the Mishkan, going back to what Andrea said, the dwelling place, the pre-temple structure that, as the story goes, the Israelites carried with them through the desert. So how goodly is the Mishkan? And then the temple itself, when these flourished, meaning when they were in existence. Why? Not only because they were places of worship and prayer. This is a real nuance here, but in that sacrifices were offered in them to atone. So Rashi is quoting a commentary here that what is good? It's a couple layers here. What is good about what are the tents and what's good about them? The tents refer not to the dwelling places of the people of Israel, but to the main tents of worship, the Mishkan itself, the sanctuary itself that traveled with the Israelites through the desert, and also the actual temple, the main dwelling place. What became the main dwelling place, not just for God's presence, but also the verse in the Torah to build a Mishkan so that God can dwell among the people, not only in the Mishkan. These are places of God's presence, as Andrea was saying earlier. And also what's key about this, that the Israelites in the time of the sanctuary and the temple had a mechanism by which they could atone for their sins easily. Maimonides, when he talks about the laws of repentance, teshuvah, he says the only thing we have in our day today without the temple is the process of teshuvah, apologies with words, allowing for forgiveness. But in the time of the sanctuary and the temple, according to our tradition, the Israelites could also atone for their sins, and the early Jews could atone for their sins through sacrifices. So what is holy or unique or special? What is Bilaam saying when he says, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov? How good are your tents? He's not talking about the people of Israel. He's not even talking about their modesty. He's not talking about building places of prayer or study. He's talking about atonement and God's presence, the ability to more easily atone for one's sins and having that mechanism, that process in place. So we're adding to the mix now in another commentary. What's good about the people of Israel? It's an atonement process that they had, and perhaps, as Maimonides says, even though we don't have sacrifices today, which some of us may consider a good thing, we don't want to have animal sacrifices, I imagine, especially for the vegetarians among us or the vegans among us. The process of atonement as a key part of Israelite religion, the Jewish religion, is something noteworthy, something that's a blessing that Bilaam is noticing. Okay, so I want to pause here because that's a lot of information. That's a lot of variations in this one commentary. So first, are there any clarifications on this particular Rashi commentary, which offers two very different things? The quotidian, what does Mishkanotecha mean? The people themselves, the masses, all the tents together. And somehow at the same time, another interpretation is what's so good about the people of Israel? It's a process of atonement that's built into their religion of forgiveness. Any clarification questions at the moment? Any bigger picture, theological questions or reflection?
Jeffrey was saying in the chat, and it may also be echoed by some other comments, that the quality of the atonement, the quality of the tshuva is
Very nice.
I guess it matters.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you to Jeffrey. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a beautiful that in older times, there was perhaps a quality of atonement according to this text. Okay, I'll call on Miriam and then Arnold.
Yes, I was going to say that whole theme is very much conveyed in King David's Psalm 33.
Oh, okay. Can you say more? I don't know the psalm by heart.
Oh, well, read the beginning of it.
Sure, please.
A song by David to be sung on the steps of the Holy Temple. Behold, how good and pleasant it is when all of the Jewish nation are like brothers, will settle in the land of Israel and will also live together in one kingdom.
Miriam, this is 33, you said?
Psalm 133.
Oh, 133, my bad. Okay, let's pull that up and everyone can take a look at it. Okay, beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so what's so interesting is when Bilaam says, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael, the song that came out of that, another song that came out that is very related that you're highlighting, Miriam, thank you, is also, is this it? Ma tovu ohalecha mishkenotecha Yisrael. Is, yeah, a different song. But I can't remember how it begins, but Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. It is good for brothers to dwell together, which actually is very interesting because I would just say, I think with Bilaam, he's focused on the people of Israel and their dwelling together. Matovu Ohalecha Yaakov. Look at the people of Israel and the ways in which they dwell together. And in Psalm 133, I would venture to say that you could perhaps interpret, isn't it good for brothers of different tribes to dwell together? So it's a beautiful extension of our verse today. Thank you. Okay, Arnold, if you could speak briefly, and then I want to close out with some, pull everything together for us today.
Yeah, very briefly, when Balak, what Balak sees when he looks over the mountain is soldiers ready to attack. What Balaam seems to see is the future. He sees these people in the Holy Land, living together, having a place, as others say, to atone for their sins, but living there. So he sees the future, and even though they are an army, what he's seeing is a people settled in the land. And that's why it's lovely to him.
That is just a really stunning interpretation and insight that Balak lives in a sense of fear and negativity and completely the present, whereas Bilaam offers something of the future and what could be positive. That's really beautiful. Thank you so much. So I want to begin to close out. Okay, and I'll make a comment on this final Rashi in a moment, but what you can see here is a summary of what we've discussed so far. I copied and pasted it from another document, so I don't have all of your words incorporated, but I'll come back to that in a moment, but the last Rashi here also focuses on one of the comments that you all made, and I think it was Jeff in the chat, if I'm not mistaken. I apologize if I made an error with the name, but the idea that when sacrifices were discussed in this commentary as a means of atonement, there was something unique and special about that atonement process. But notice there's another Rashi commentary where he says, but it's also, there's even blessing in the ruins, right? And we've heard, I think I might have put down here, yes, the Hasidic teaching that there's nothing more whole than a broken heart. And as people here may have heard Leonard Cohen's lyrics from his song Anthem, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in, based on a Hasidic teaching. So there's so much here, but what I want us again to think about is when we read this Torah portion, this Shabbat in the future, there's so much richness to it, and there's such rich poetry. There's this idea, I think, that there's this inevitability of blessing, that God causes Bilaam to speak words of blessing. And perhaps we can kind of extend from that we have the ability ourselves to sometimes choose blessing rather than curse, choose to look for the positive. And then when we do look for the positive, what do we look for? We can look for all sorts of things. And the rabbinic interpretation of just this one verse in this beautiful poetry offers us nuances of modesty, looking for humility and modesty amongst ourselves, amongst others, looking for communities of prayer, looking for study and curiosity, the value of learning, looking for goodness in everyone, looking for God's presence, looking for forgiveness and atonement, and even in ruins, in difficulty, in pain and sorrow, we can also look for the blessing. So I want to offer everyone today that we look for those blessings, we look for the good, and even as in these difficult times, we ask ourselves, am I contributing to the difficulty and the negativity, or can I contribute to good and to help foster and nurture blessing in our own lives, in our communities, and well beyond when possible. So Shabbat Shalom to you all, and I will look forward to learning with you again next time we're together.
Thank you all. Shabbat Shalom. Wishing you well. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Shabbat
you.
shalom.
Thank
That
you.
was fantastic.
Have a
Thank you
wonderful
Shalom.
day,
so
everybody.
much.
Shabbat shalom.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
See you
very
next
much.
time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom.